Hey there, it's Wednesday, which means another session of asymmetric power with me, Dr. V. So, in today's podcast, we're going to discuss, as we always do, two news items. One is the panic over Deepseek. Why did it make big tech and other AI exposed stocks plunge in the market? Why they have recuperated somewhat? Why did Nvidia lose $600 billion in market capitalization? And what does this really mean for the rest of us? Like, we're not big tech, but we use big tech, and we keep hearing AI, fill in the blank here, and what it means for our lives. What does this mean for the common person and our daily lives? And what can we expect? And how did a little player use asymmetric power to generate all this chaos? That's a great case of asymmetric power. The second thing we're going to discuss is maps and the power of naming, particularly Trump's Gulf of America. He wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico. He's renaming the Gulf of Mexico. He's doing it into the Gulf of America. It's happening. And how does that happen? How do you do that? Again, this is another case and study in asymmetric power, because in asymmetric power you find these little portals of that you need, the little gates you need to cross in order to make things happen and become a reality, and then infiltrate the public consciousness, right? And destabilize that political base, which is the base of everything. First, Deepseek AI. So the big news about Deepseek is they had originally launched really in December and nobody really took much notice. They were as good as, ChatGPT version 1. Then they launched again a few weeks later. People didn't really take much notice, and it took a while, a bit like podcasts, right? It takes a while. And then people said, oh my God, then suddenly all at once, right? People realized what had happened, that they had launched this search engine, not just search engine, but an AI built completely open source, so everybody can access the code and you can build on it, basically using these much cheaper chips that Nvidia said, were still their chips. But these chips that they used were under export control. So the US has been in with this, war with China, commercial war, but particularly over AI dominance. And I said to NVIDIA, thou shalt not sell these higher powered chips that are needed for advanced artificial intelligence to China. So China didn't buy them. The export controls worked, and they bought these much cheaper chips. The problem is that US big tech has been raising, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars to develop artificial intelligence. And it turns out all of that money wasn't needed. And to do that, they were also buying these very expensive, top of the line chips from NVIDIA. So it suddenly turns out, I think it was The Economist who said this, that it's like if you're selling shovels in a gold rush and you have a gold mountain next door you can get with your hands, you're sort of in trouble selling the shovels, which is NVIDIA selling the chips. The other thing is that they also did it they also do it using a lot less energy, which is why a bunch of things, they have investments that touch AI, like data centers, real estate for data centers, locations of data centers, the power for data centers. Data centers for artificial intelligence consume so much energy that it would make most current national grids within the U.S. crash, right? Our systems just don't have that. So now big tech is trying to plug straight into power plants, which is creating political problems for, do we really want, Google or Meta to plug straight into these power plants and have priority over our electricity before us in our homes? And the other answer to that has been, of course, then we can also get nuclear power plants, right? So the discussion about nuclear power plants is back because we need more energy. So we need more energy to power all this artificial intelligence and nuclear energy is one of them. One of the things we've seen is Enron. Remember Enron from the one of the great big corporate fraud cases in the, I think, 90s or late 80s, is now building little things that look like eggs that you can have in your living room and on little mini nuclear power plants, on the premise that you could have all this. And NVIDIA themselves built this tiny little computer to power all of this AI. That's about like $3,000. And now all of that has gone out the window, because if you don't need massive data centers, if you need cheaper chips and you need less energy, this is good news for us because it's the democratization of artificial intelligence. It means that companies such as the one I'm invested in London, this AI venture studio, Time Machine Capital, can build all these different verticals and all of these different applications, and that AI will be sort of everywhere in everything that we do. But it won't be dominated by the big three or the big 10 or the big five, that it will just literally be custom built for many more people in many more applications and much more cheaply. And it will become commoditized, a little bit like the telephone was, or the fax machine, or even the very internet, right? Which started originally as a Defense Department experiment. So that's what it really means. So it might be a panic for NVIDIA that was selling these really big, expensive chips and then to the valuation of these big tech companies, because it means that they're going to face a lot more competition. It's democratized. We will see how this plays out. There are still remaining questions. Is Deepseek as good as they claim it is? Is this, I've read some articles that claim that it's better at answering quantitative questions rather than large language models. But also, ironically, it would not have been possible without American innovation, right? They basically built off the back of a lot of open AI algorithms and a lot of things that were already out there. So it's because of American innovation that this Chinese company came on top, built sort of an AI search engine that doesn't go everywhere all at once, but sort of channels its answers. I'm trying to make this a very complicated issue rather simpler. And now, if they can do this again, a third and a fourth and a fifth time, we will face a major disruption in artificial intelligence. But we, the generalized consumers, should be happy about that. Big tech needs to be worried about it, and so do the regulators, because it's much harder to regulate, thousands of players than it is to regulate 4, 5, or 10. So now for the next topic, right? My other great topic of the week that I find very amusing is the Gulf of America. That Trump has said that the Gulf of Mexico will be renamed the Gulf of America. This is clearly a very ideological play. It's a very political play, but it's a popular one. Like that, this is why these political plays work, because they resonate, right? America is a bigger economic power than Mexico. It's a bigger military power than Mexico. Its coastline is enormously exposed to the Gulf of Mexico. Now the Gulf of America, its coastline is, I believe, bigger than Mexico's. So it holds sort of a certain appeal, innate appeal, and not only that, a lot of the even exploration of oil that is done in the Gulf of Mexico by both Mexico and the U.S. The U.S. again being the greater power, and a lot of the processing, the refineries are in the Gulf of Mexico, including for places like the country where I was born, Venezuela. Right, it was exported to states that touch the Gulf of Mexico. Right, so now the Gulf of America. Can Trump do this? Is it going to be real? Guess what? Google announced it will be real. How can Google roll over and say that their Google Maps will now indicate Gulf of America? Well, not everywhere all at once. The way it was, it'll be a little bit like the NVIDIA collapse with the revelation of the brilliance of Deepseek. It will suddenly go, will go slowly and then suddenly, right? So Google Maps have said that they will take their cue from something called GNIS, which is the Geographical Names Information System. So, which is the U.S. government repository for geographical names, right? So this mountain in Alaska will once again be named Mount McKinley, taken away its indigenous name that it got in 2015, and simultaneously the Gulf of Mexico will be renamed the Gulf of America. Yeah, Trump can do this. If GNIST, Geographical Names Information System, renames it the Gulf of America, Google will then have to follow suit, and at least initially for people who are searching, right, their IP address, for Americans who are searching from the US to say, what is this thing called? It will show Gulf of America. What will probably happen is that if you search from another country, say Spain or somewhere in Africa or South America, and say, what is this body called? It might still say Gulf of Mexico, but known within the U.S. as the Gulf of America. So it will start to show, based on the IP address, your location of the person querying it, Trump's name, Gulf of America, and then it will, because once that happens, it will then have to go and cite that at least as a second name for searches from outside that region. And then it will enter the global parlance, right? As you see more and more talks and publications that say Gulf of Mexico, in parentheses, Gulf of America, and then you'll slightly move into the use of Gulf of America. This is, again, an asymmetric power play, right? You start with the thing you can do, which is your presidential order, and then you go through the technocratic ways, your gateways, right, which is your GNIS, and then it will go enter Google Maps. Now, the importance of maps, I want to make a point here, is critical, right? So I would presume that many of you have seen the movie The English Patient, which is the premise of The English Patient is based on the rather boring maps which the Nazis wanted, and the British were developing of the maps of North Africa for battles in the Sahara Desert, which were critical. And the Brits were very good at navigating the Sahara Desert because they're very good sailors, and sailing and navigating through sand deserts is not that different from navigating at sea. But the Royal Geographic Society maps is really at the heart of this film, to understand where things are and also how they're named. And how they're named is something that Putin also used very much in his, at first, again, slowly and then suddenly all at once invasion of Ukraine. He overtook Crimea, and the basis that Crimea was originally more Russian-speaking and had featured on Russian maps and was really historically a part of Russia, and then started with that and now has invaded Ukraine, right? Which is what the rest of the world, what the Western world, as particularly Europe, is pushing back on. But the power to name really plays on, again, that political power of the people who support the policies, who support the presidencies. And there are two dynamics, right? You want to first get the people on board to assume that this territory is yours, that you therefore have rightful control. Once it's renamed the Gulf of America, don't be surprised to see a more aggressive action, even military action in that area, right? After all, you'll be defending the Gulf of America. So this always goes, step by step. But if those of us who have played in the asymmetric power space can sort of see what's coming. Naturally, of course, Nicaragua, Cuba, Mexico were not very happy about this. And it's also a very similar play to, by the way, what China has done, right? They have built these artificial islands and claim that they are part of the, East China Sea, and that therefore they belong to China. And Trump is following that same playbook. Again, it's a playbook that Trump has played more aggressively than others in the West we do normally, than we are used to seeing in a Western liberal democracy. But he didn't invent it. These things have been there for hundreds of years. And so when you read the news about Deepseek or the Gulf of America, I hope you will think of me. Hope you will look at it through an asymmetric power lens. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And please subscribe. Get your friends to subscribe, and tune in next time. And hasta la próxima. Thank you very much.